Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, we're going to have a discussion on funerals, and inshallah with me is Ustadh Khalid Hassan. We're at Madinah College, and it's also on YouTube Live. If you've got any questions, then please feel free to send them on the Instagram, inshallah, on the topic of funerals. Okay, the reason this is the topic that we're speaking about is, I think, evident to everyone who, living in this time has lost someone who's beloved, and also there's a fear of losing someone if you haven't lost someone as a result of COVID and the like. So I think it's important to reflect over funerals, as well as what's before funeral and what happens after funerals as well, to the deceased perhaps, and to those that they leave behind, how they can best prepare for their own funeral and help those that are on the deathbed or like prepare for their funeral, inshallah. So that's the topic, inshallah. So without going on too much, we'll go straight into the topic, inshallah, with Ustadh Khalid. Inshallah, give salam to Ustadh. Everyone's you're on.
Wa alaikum salam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Naam, so obviously, this topic of death is a very important topic, and inshallah ta'ala, we're going to try to obviously speak about the most important masail relating to that. So Shaykh AbdulWahid, when it comes to the topic of grief, when it comes to the topic of death, what's the Muslim standpoint to it?
I think, okay, so first of all, we've come to death, and one of the topics that is often missed is preparing for death.
Yeah.
So, often we think about preparing for death, and we're talking about, knowing that, fixing, making tawbah, repenting before you die. And this is without a doubt very important, because you want to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without having anyone to have claims against you. So you want to rectify what is between you and other people.
Exactly.
So that someone doesn't come on Yawm al-Qiyamah and say, oh, you did this and you didn't rectify it. You oppressed me by backbiting, you oppressed me by slandering me, you oppressed me by, for example, in the case of a relationship, not giving me my haqq, the husband to the wife to the husband. So these are the things that require tawbah and require rectification before a person dies. That's one aspect. But another aspect which is not talked about a lot, and I think this is really key here, is the practical things which are going to happen after you. There's your kids. You might, if you're married, you can leave behind kids. All right. Okay. What advice are you leaving for your kids when you die? What are you saying to them?
Yeah.
Are you leaving a wasiyah, like we know in the story of Luqman, for example? The wasiyah to the children when you die. Okay. Also, when you die, for example, your absence is leaving a void for that are behind. So, for example, if you're married, your wife, if you're a wife, your husband, your parents, for example, if you died before them, you're leaving a void. Okay, how are they going to deal with this as well? So you got all those aspects which is not always spoken about. So I think the first one I want to ask and to speak about is to do with when a person dies, there's things that come out of their inheritance before they die, that they leave behind, and this is by way of planning for a funeral. So, for example, their funeral, the cost of the funeral. So can you speak about the things that, okay, if we look at it, start from backwards and work in, look at what happens after you've died, what's happening to what has to happen
to your estate,
and stuff like that. The steps, and then we can prepare for that.
Of course,
inshallah.
obviously. So obviously, just on a basis, inshallah ta'ala, you'll hopefully expand on some of these. But obviously, some of the things that, if you look at the books of fara'id, where you study fara'id, they talk about, and fara'id is, for those who don't know, is Islamic inheritance. So when you study Islamic inheritance, before you even get into dividing the wealth, we have to deal with, okay, the dead person, what does he own, and what needs to go to respected individuals and respected institutions before the tarika, his wealth is distributed. And one of them is obviously his funeral costs. So obviously the ulama say that, and generally obviously this is some of the opinions of Hanabila, but there's the ulama of obviously there's general consensus in a lot of what they say in terms of his funeral should be paid for. So obviously that
that comes out of where? Out of his
wealth,
out of his money. So he pays for his own funeral. It's not an expense which is paid for.
It's not for no. Especially with the Kalam of the Hanabila. So obviously he pays for his shroud and things like that. And obviously in the UK or in the West in general, and even maybe some Muslim countries, obviously that might even include grave costs.
Yeah, so which is how much what we're speaking
obviously
about.
Obviously, we're looking at from £3,000 to £5,000.
Yeah,
even £6,000.
Yeah.
So obviously you have those costs.
Yeah.
And obviously his debt has to be paid before. Obviously, if he has any debts, and his debts need to be paid.
Yeah.
So obviously, these are some of the very important issues that Muslims obviously need to look into.
Yeah.
Do you have any more things that you'd like to expound upon, inshallah ta'ala, with regards to what we do before we even bury the person, some of where his money goes to?
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, so the funeral costs and the shroud, the burial. And what I want to, I guess, what's important here is that it's on the person. It's not something that he thinks, okay, no worries, when I die, someone else is going to take care of it. Meaning that our mindset, when you see death all around you, the question I think everyone should ask themselves is, okay, what have I got planned for when I die? Have we planned our funeral?
Exactly.
It sounds a bit morbid, but the point is, we plan, for example, why we're studying at university to the degree so we can get a career. We're planning our work, we're planning our education, we're planning. At the same time, just because you're young doesn't mean you're not going to die, meaning that you're 30s, 40s, anyone, you can die at any age, obviously. So the question is, as well as thinking about, what your next job is going to be, you should also think about when you die, have you got your funeral expenses paid for? Is it something that you've got planned? And the other thing is a wasiyah. Have you?
The wasiyah, exactly.
Yeah. Have you left a parting advice?
A parting advice. Yeah.
So. I think it's about planning the practical steps of the funeral, not just as in addition to the tawbah and stuff like that.
And I think that's obviously when it comes down to it, mashallah, when you say that obviously planning your funeral, obviously, you might see adverts in TV where you might see, when people, are told to pay, for example, life insurance or something like that. And obviously as a Muslim, that's not something that we do. And I think obviously many Muslims who may, for example, come from other countries where this thing isn't something that's necessary, you just simply, the graveyard is a communal area where you don't even have to pay for. So we have to understand that that's not the case here. You have to actually think about that, because if that doesn't happen, we get so many text messages about a brother who's died, who's in the morgue, and if nobody claims him, if nobody whatever, they're gonna just either incinerate him they're gonna cremate him, or they're gonna put him in a pauper's grave or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's really, really important that Muslims understand that. Preparing for your funeral is very, very important. If you don't have the money, then obviously telling your loved ones and speaking to people about it, that look, in the case of my demise, at least letting them know this is what the costs may be, so that the community can come together if you can't do it yourself. But if you have the ability to do it yourself, then it's very important for you to do it yourself.
And I think that's what's key. If you have the ability, you should do it. You shouldn't think to yourself, okay, it's not my responsibility.
Exactly.
And this is the thing. I think that it's your responsibility to plan your funeral. It's not the responsibility of anybody else.
You put them in a hal. That's very, very difficult. Put them in a situation
which is difficult. Okay, another topic which is pertain around funerals before we actually talk about the janazah itself, the funeral, is the person that's dying. What type of, how should they be, not how they should they be thinking, but what is the advice, for example, to the person that's on their deathbed? Because now, for example, someone's they're at a hospital with COVID, for example, and they get news that they're saying, okay, no, we need to put them on ventilation. Okay, when they say they're going to put you on ventilation, there's that real fear that
you might not
you're not going to make it out because of the numbers. If you look at the probability, I think it's 40% of people on ventilation don't come back out. So what would, it's a real situation. On ventilation, okay, what are you going to say to the person that's about to go on ventilation without scaring them into thinking they're going to die?
Exactly.
And at the same time as well, yourself, how are you going to respond?
Well, that's a very, very good question. You know what I mean? Obviously, I can only answer to the best of my ability. But obviously, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam obviously said, "Akthiru min dhikri hadhim al-ladhat." Remember death, the destroyer of pleasures. One thing that the ulama say regarding this person is it's very, very important for the person himself. Well, first and foremost, we have to understand that if a person's in a situation, and this is why Corona allows us to explore certain ahkam, which is quite good, because we're seeing a lot of things that the fuqaha talk about, that the scholars, that the juristic scholars talk about, because they say, for example, that it's very, very important when the person is either close to dying or we think they're going to die. And the reason why the scholars say we think they're going to die is because there wasn't hospitals at that time, so they could not determine whether or not this marad is a marad that's going to kill him. So they say if we think he's going to die, it's very, very important. Number one, we don't annoy that person. So you can't tell him about the akhirah in an annoying way, where you're talking to him the way you're talking to a person who's alive and well. You're gonna have to understand you're talking to someone whose mental faculty is probably not the same, maybe somewhat delusional, maybe someone who is more sometimes a dying person or very sick person can become quite short with the person who's dealing with them. So you have to be very, very gentle with them. Even the ulama talk about, when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Laqinu mawtakum la ilaha illallah," say la ilaha illallah to your dead. The ulama say, for example, when you're talking to them, you don't say to the person, "Qul la ilaha illallah." You don't say to him, say. Everyone around should gently just say things like la ilaha illallah, and maybe talk about the akhirah and talk about Allah's rahmah with the person next to you, without even saying that, "Yo, this is for you. You better make sure that you say la ilaha illallah because you're out of here in 5 minutes." Yeah, and you can't.
So in other words, obviously the hadith when you say the person whose last statement is la ilaha illallah enters paradise, dakhla Jannah, it's not, now you're thinking to yourself, you want them to be the person that goes to Jannah.
Exactly.
So you'd be like, for example, as a child to their parent, or the other way around, you'd be like, please say this statement so I can go. Instead of saying that, you'll be like la ilaha illallah yourself, so that they're going to listen, they can
naturally listen. And obviously we don't know the hal of the person when he's dying. Perhaps his last utterance is la ilaha illallah, but maybe all you hear is murmurings, but you don't know. So don't always judge the apparent on, does he have to say la ilaha illallah? A person who's dying is in sometimes a very difficult state. The ulama also state that sometimes to give them water to drink, because a dead person or person that's in the hala, they call it ihtidar, of dying, is very thirsty, is very needy. For the person himself, obviously it's very difficult to sometimes say you, the person that's ill, but obviously a person at that time is naturally speaking going to be in a somber mood, in feeling kind of repentant. So obviously that person obviously needs to try their best to make peace with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ask Allah to forgive him. But like what you said, when you said all the issue of it's upon you to pay for your own funeral, it's upon you now to have raised children that are going to, even in the situation of you not being able to speak, you not being able to do to control your affairs, you should have left a generation, children who know what to do for their sick father. They know that when he dies, we need to look at the people that maybe he was on bad terms with. We know that we have to pay his debts. We know we have to do this and that for him. You can't just leave chaos and expect that chaos to turn into order.
Yeah.
Do you have any things you want to say on that, Shaykh AbdulWahid, afwan?
No. I think I agree, obviously, what you're saying. And take another point, another question, I guess, or just to speak about is, the people crying. You see, some people might think, okay, what are you crying for? You're not being patient. Or the person crying. You might think to the person, okay, why are you crying? You should have good hopes of, like, you crying means that you're disappointed and stuff like that. They may have the misconception. Or, for example, maybe having like some type of shakawa, or some type of speaking about, things that they're not going to be able to, Don't might say, okay, don't say that because you're displeased with what Allah has decreed for you and stuff like that. And that isn't always the case. Obviously, a person cries because of sadness. It's an emotion which is compassion. You see what I'm saying? And there's talk about how crying is is healing. When you cry, saying, have a good cry, let it out, for example. It's a way of a person healing and feeling better afterwards, instead of bottling it up.
I think that's a very good thing that you say that.
The Prophet cried as well. Yeah.
People need to understand a very important point, and it's the fact that Islam does not tell you to block up your emotion. It teaches us to control our emotion. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to feel sad. That's part of the feeling. That's part of the grieving process. The issue is being in a state of calmness and trying to control that feeling. If you've lost a parent, that's going to be devastating. You being devastated does not mean your iman is low. That's a very important thing, like what you said. So if you're crying, as long as you're not wailing, inshallah ta'ala, there's no problem. You've lost somebody that obviously you find beloved. So for a person to think that as a Muslim you have to bottle everything up, then you're gonna have a brain aneurysm. Something else is gonna happen. You have to let out your human emotions in accordance to the Sharia. And the Sharia gives you leeway to grieve. A grieving spouse is given more than 4 months to grieve for us. Mourning period. The widow. You have to understand that that is the case. Now, when we look at, for example, why the Islam, when you look at, for example, why Islam speeds up the burial process, in reality, that actually helps you to heal. If a person dies and it takes 28 days for you to bury them, you're in a stasis. You can't move on from the actual fact. When you actually bury the person, as horrible as it might seem, you're closing a door to a chapter in your life. And even though it's difficult, you're able to move on. But if there's, like, for example, a period of 30 days sometimes to make all the family come, and everyone from Australia and this place and that place come for the big funeral, and then at the funeral it's even more horrible. That's an intensification of your
So
grieving.
another point is Islam. You should bury as soon as possible, basically. You shouldn't delay the burial.
Exactly,
So that's part of the Son of the Prophet Muhammad. Very straight away.
Exactly,
Yeah.
So
and again, like you said, if I think especially now, one of the issues, for example, I think subhanAllah, with regards to especially COVID, one of the problems in the non-Muslim cemeteries or graveyards or funeral services now is that they're saying that, look, because it's taking so long to bury, the bodies are piling up. There's nowhere to put the bodies because it takes so long to organize the janazah, the funeral, basically. But alhamdulillah, as Muslims, you get buried the next day, if not the day after. So it happens quickly, so they don't have that. And just on something that I read today, which is subhanAllah, shocking and sad, and this is obviously one of the burial gardens. They said this month they buried 490 Muslims in their burial garden, and the average in January last year was 109. Just to show you that death is all around us, basically, because of the COVID and stuff. So you should bury quickly. Okay, what's next? What happens? Okay, now that, for example, you've gone through that process where they planned their funeral. Okay, alhamdulillah, they've also you've spoken about the advice on the deathbed, and we spoke a little bit about grieving, I guess. There's another issue, which is as someone that knows someone else that died. So, for example, someone and their parents just passed away, or a parent, or they just lost a child. What do you do? How do you behave as a Muslim towards your Muslim brother, your Muslim sister that lost someone in their life? How can you?
I mean, obviously, inshallah ta'ala, obviously, you have to, number one, know the personality of the person that you're dealing with. And in accordance to their personality, you're going to deal with them you're going to deal with a person in accordance with their personality. So if you know that this person's an introverted person, it might not be the best thing to be up in their face and saying to them, I'm so sorry. Even, maybe leaving a missed call, just so that they know. They might not be they might not even be able to speak to you. Sometimes some people don't want to speak to anyone. So it's very, very important that you act tactfully towards them. You act in a way which is soothing, if you can. You don't have to hound them and phone them and say, Akhi al-Kareem. Obviously, you have got ta'ziyah. You have got the obviously the ability. But if I'm correct, ta'ziyah can't be after 3 days. Can you give ta'ziyah? That's another issue. And
what's ta'ziyah?
Ta'ziyah is to give. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Ta'ziyah is to give. Your
condolences to the
commiserations,
condolences.
Exactly.
And what's the dua? There's a dua that you say that the Messenger of Allah taught us with regards to saying to the one that's lost somebody.
Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Was another one.
Exactly.
So that's obviously the dua that you say to a person. And obviously what we have to understand is that al-ikhtisaru ala sunnah is the best thing, as Ibn Qayyim said, that for us to limit ourselves upon the sunnah is better than trying to do many, many good deeds upon that which is not from the sunnah. So it's very, very important to say the simple du'as, to say the simple kind of ta'ziyah, and for us to kind of allow the dead family to have their space, to the point where, unfortunately, in many Muslim families, when the person dies themselves, what do you call it? What do you call it? They make food for everybody else. When in fact, when I think it was Ja'far, I'm not sure if it was Ja'far, one of the companions died, or the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Isna'u li ali Ja'farin ta'aman," or whoever the companion was, فقد جاءهم أو فقد أتاهم ما يشغلهم. Something has come which has made them busy to even think about cooking.
Yeah.
So the community came and brought them cooking. So sometimes even taking care of some of the basic needs, because sometimes when you're in a state of grief, it makes you so busy that you forget sometimes the normal functions of your day, which goes back to your previous question of grief. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that we should cook for our neighbors or our Muslim brothers who have died, because the level of grief has stopped them from being able to cook. So if that's the case of cooking, we can obviously see that Islam allows us to talk about, Islam allows us to grieve.
Yeah.
Now. So.
Yeah, and I think that highlights an important point as well, which is how you helping. So it's a case of maybe it's like you said, you don't want to kind of hound the person, give them space, but at the same time let them know that you're there. If it's a text message, I'm here for you. Can I help? Just let me know. And sometimes it's the text message because they don't want to speak to anyone, because they're feeling grieved and stuff like that.
Exactly.
That's also I think really important. Okay, one of the things that comes up is what you can do for the deceased, because you always that question's come up a lot recently to me specifically. What my family are saying, I can do this, I can do that. What can you do? What benefits the deceased after they've passed away primarily? What actually benefits them?
Okay, so obviously some of the ulama, they say, for example, and this is just a general rule, and obviously some ulama might have different sayings, but some ulama of the opinion and major classical scholars, they say, كل عمل يعني يدخل فيه أو تدخل فيه أو تدخل أو يدخل فيه النيابة, then it is permissible for you to do it on the dead person. Every kind of action that you're able to do for a second party, or a second party is able to do for you, then you're able to do it, for example, for the dead person. So you're able to do hajj for the person, you're able to do umrah for the dead person, you're able to give sadaqah for the dead person. But then now even though that's the case, we need to ask ourselves, we don't want to look for anything we can do for the dead person, for the mayyit. We want to do what's best for the mayyit. So with regards to what's best for the mayyit, obviously, mashallah, there's this new phenomena, obviously because it's on people, obviously because of social media, mashallah. And it's a good thing. It shows that Muslims have khair, that when a person dies, practicing, non-practicing, be as it may, the first thing people want to do is open up like a GoFundMe account whereby we pay to maybe grow an olive tree, or to give some mushafs on this person's behalf and things like that. I think also, number one, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when a slave dies, 3 things benefit them. Number one, ilmun nafi', beneficial knowledge, sadaqatu jariyah, or sadaqatul jariyah, afwan, as-sadaqa al-jariyah, the sadaqah, ongoing charity, ongoing. Yeah. Or
which is like waqf, basically,
like a trust you left
behind,
exactly,
which is managed, which continues to benefit people.
Exactly. And a waqf is obviously like an endowment or something that you do, like you said. Or waladun salih yad'u lahu, or a pious child, a pious young man who makes da'wah for his father, and it can be any, a man or woman. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the Arabic language, and a person speaks in the, obviously, with male pronouns. As long if it's not specific to males, it applies to everyone.
Yeah.
So what the ulama say is this, and Ibn Uthaymeen says this, and I heard it from Shaykh Khalid as well, look, all the other actions are good, but the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam specified for a person who is not rich and for a person that didn't have knowledge, is for them to leave behind a pious child that makes dua. So dua, we know that dua specifically helps the mayyit, it helps the dead person, because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam la yadhkur illa al-ahsan, he only tells us that which is the best. So the fact that he's telling us to make dua for the mayyit shows that the small deed is sometimes the best deed. Before we try our best to open up a madrasa in the brother's name, or build a well in Africa or something like that, make sure you make dua for the mayyit, you make dua for him, sincere dua. Because this can help him in the akhirah, because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that this is what can be done. And then obviously you can do things like giving charity and other than that. So Shaykh, do you have anything else you wanna say on that topic?
No, I think
just another thing also, when the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said waladun salih yad'u lahu, obviously it's just very, very important. Obviously we give our children obviously tarbiyah so that they can make dua for us obviously after we die.
Yeah.
So now
I think that's really obviously the role of your family in continuing your legacy, basically your good deeds and your benefit in this worldly life. They're an extension of you, basically. So your children are an extension of you. Your family is an extension of you. Their children, inshallah. So if you want to leave behind something which is going to be good, and what you can leave behind which is good, in addition to any inheritance or wealth that you leave behind, is obviously benefiting them by teaching them and cultivating them and educating them. And inshallah, you have to put dua, trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dua is key, obviously.
Exactly.
Another point that I think is, I think we'll make this a last point because it's a bit controversial, is regards to tadawi, or seeking cure for illnesses. So the reason we mention it, some people say, okay, look, COVID, COVID, the vaccine, do I take the vaccine, don't take the vaccine? No, I'm not saying tell them should they or shouldn't they. It's up to them. But with regards to seeking cure, there's sometimes a misunderstanding between, for example, having tawakkul and seeking a cure, or not even a misunderstanding, more to do with the fact that there's this even in the culture that I was growing up in, okay, your body can cure itself, why do you need to take medicine? I just eat right and you'll be okay.
Yeah, make sure you blend those celery sticks and put some kale inside, some beetroot, and you'll be fine.
Yeah,
some guacamole
vinegar,
or something.
Take natural remedies,
sea moss and all that.
Yeah, without criticizing natural remedies or herbal remedies, because they have benefit. Obviously, there's no doubt about it. Eating healthy is also good.
100%.
All that stuff is good. What does Islam say, first of all, on taking medicine? Because that's the whole point. Obviously, there's a hadith, seek cure of black seed.
Exactly.
Seek cure with black seed, meaning that don't say, okay, I'm going to have tawakkul, my body cures itself, my immune system's strong. Do you know what I mean? So what on that point?
Exactly.
And then we'll bring it around to the vaccine, inshallah.
So obviously, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us not to do tadawi. We should not seek a cure with haram. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what we need to understand about this hadith, okay, is
tadawi bil haram.
Exactly.
Seek cure, but don't seek cure with haram.
You have two things we need to understand. We have to understand what's been said and what's been inferred. Al-mantuq wal-mafhum. What's been said is, do not seek cure with haram. So what we can infer from that, which is what the ulama call al-mafhum, what we can infer and understand from the hadith is, we can take a cure from everything that is halal. Okay, so as long as it's permissible, you're allowed to take a cure. Now I want to ask everyone a question. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Kulu min at-tayyibati ma razaqnakum. So take from that which is good from the earth, from that which we have given you. Okay, can I say to you right now that I'm not going to eat any food, I'm going to have tawakkul on Allah, because Allah said that He will give rizq to His ibad. So I'm waiting for the rizq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come, and then inshallah ta'ala Allah will give me His rizq and it will enrich me on His own. No, I have to make a physical effort to go and eat. Okay, so right now, if a person is sick, they have to make a physical effort to try their best to get better. If you eat, does that mean that you're having tawakkul on the food? Or do you know that your life is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You know that your life is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And eating food is a means of survival that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put on the earth. Likewise, the pill that you're swallowing, it might look like something which is foreign from you, but everything in that pill came from the earth. It's just gone through a process of transformation. Exactly. Penicillin comes from, natural things. Paracetamol, all these things come from, believe it or not, trees and other things like that are extracted from herbs and other things. So it's just a it's just something which has been mixed. And obviously we know the debates on the pharmaceutical industry. We're not going to get into that. We understand that there's obviously an industry behind everything. But as the ulama talk about a Muslim who is a normal Muslim, as the ulama call wasatul khilqa, an average person, if they are sick, they should obviously take a cure. Now, with regards to taking a cure, does that mean now that a person has full tawakkul on the pill rather than Allah? I don't think any Muslim, generally speaking, normal average Muslim thinks that. Unfortunately, because of many Muslims' apprehension towards many things for many reasons, the concept of going to a hospital, the concept of seeking medical and professional help is something that we're somewhat lacking in. So we don't sometimes get help when we actually need help. Now that's something that inshallah ta'ala we should try to tackle.
Okay, just on the COVID vaccine specifically, it's something which is a lot of Muslims are apprehensive of, and non-Muslims as well. Can I put you on the spot?
Okay.
If you're offered the vaccine, you're going to take it?
I'm going to take the vaccine. I had COVID-19 and it was absolutely horrible. So I am going to definitely take the vaccine.
Okay.
No, yeah. I'm going to take the vaccine. I'm going to take the COVID-19
If you're offered the vaccine, are you going to take it? Is that yes? He's nodding his head.
I know you take.
That's the guy behind. That's the brother doing there.
MashaAllah, cameraman. Allahumma barik. Shaykh. No, I know you're going to take.
Inshallah, yeah. If I'm offered the COVID vaccine, then I'm gonna. I'll take it.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, I think there's a lot. Once somebody said something, I think it was quite profound. You know, do you want to get COVID or do you want to take the vaccine? The numbers of people that are dying of COVID are there. They're in your face. You know them. Okay, the numbers of people that are affected negatively by the vaccine to the point of death are not just marginal. Where are they? Do you get what I mean? Okay, no one knows the long-term effects. And not everyone knows long-term effects of vaccines. They don't last longer than 5 months or whatever. I'm not saying, for example, and I'm not saying that you should do it or that someone else should do it. But the point is, I don't think that there's a valid fear around it based upon the tajriba of it so far, basically. And we're talking about no vaccine, and this is a point that we're going to see. No vaccine has been tested, or has been not tested, has been used on a global scale, like the COVID vaccine in history, historically, that I know of, basically. So you know, this is rolling out on a global scale. So the numbers are there. With regards to it being haram, because there's some components in it, then it's important not to speculate. Islam doesn't allow us to speculate, to spread rumors, for example. You know, it doesn't permit that at all. What's in the vaccine is, I think one of these people on Instagram mentioned, is that, you know, it's vegan and doesn't have any alcohol, so it doesn't have anything which is impermissible. And that, just to see if there's any questions, and we'll stop with questions, 100%. Inshallah. Someone said we'll come back to the COVID vaccine. If you've got any questions, just post them up, inshallah, on the Instagram. Is there any on YouTube?
There's a question here. What dua specifically is best to make for the dead?
For the dead.
No.
Okay. Do you want to take that? Do you want to?
Tfaddal.
Obviously, the best thing to ask for, is to ask for Jannatul Firdaus. That's one. So number one, ask. If the Messenger said, if you're going to ask for Jannatul Firdaus. And this is, I think, an important point. You can take a principle from that. The Muslim, as a Muslim in life, he's always seeking the best thing, the best and the highest of things. So and it's in every aspect. If he aspires to be an engineer, he aspires to be the best engineer. If he aspires to be a scholar, he aspires to be the best scholar. You know, if he reaches it or not, that's something else. So inshallah, the best dua for them is Jannatul Firdaus, and obviously, you know, asking for Allah to forgive them, sadaqah.
And another thing I would want to say is, one of the best things to happen to the dead person also is to pray Salatul-Janaazah over them. Salatul-Janaazah is not a formality. A lot of people say, Akhi, we'll pray Salatul-Janaazah, what can we do for the dead? The fact that you did Salatul-Janaazah on the dead is a rahmah in of itself, because the point of Salatul-Janaazah is for the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to descend upon the dead person itself. It's not a formality. It's not like the dead person is going to receive nothing from the Salatul-Janaazah. If that's the case, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would not have refused to pray behind people who are dead, people that killed themselves. The Prophet Muhammad Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when a person killed himself, الرجل قتل نفسه بمشاقص, he had like a thin blade, he killed himself, he stabbed himself to death. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, صلوا على صاحبكم, pray upon your companion, pray upon this man of yours. He never said that because of the fact that the person going to, he's a kafir. He did that to show that I'm not going to, I'm trying to do zajr, I'm trying to rebuke his action, so he doesn't gain the prophetic dua that would allow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah to be upon him. So getting the Salatul-Janaazah right and understanding it, knowing the ad'iyah, the du'as of the Salatul-Janaazah is very, very important, because that itself benefits the dead person. It's
there's a hadith about if there's no muwahhid person upon tawheed, except that a specific number of people attend the janazah, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive them exactly, of their sins.
Exactly.
So the
40 people.
40 people, like that, So there's it's important that people attend the funeral of the, and it's from the haqq al-Muslim ala al-Muslim, isn't it?
Exactly, from the
janazah, to follow the funeral procession. So, and it's fard kifaya, it's an obligation as well. So the funeral is important, attending it. And attending it doesn't just mean the salah, also means going to the graveyard,
to the burial,
and burying, and making dua, because when after the funeral, you stand there, you make dua for the dead person,
thabat and all that.
For thabat, because he's going to be questioned in his grave. Exactly. There's a lot of issues around funerals and what happens after a person dies.
Exactly.
Another question: does the dead feel anything when they get put into the freezer?
Good question. That's a very good question. I know. Do you think it's worth answering, Shaykh AbdulWahid?
Allah Ta'ala Alam.
I mean, from what I obviously, I did a university course. It was called Al-Fiqh Al-Tibbi in the University of Qasim, and what we did was we spoke about this particular issue, and these alat tabreed, as they're called, these fridges. Obviously, what we know, there's no hadith which is sarih, which is clear cut, which shows us that the dead person, feels. Anything when they die. And the explanation for the hadith of breaking the leg for the Muslim for a dead person in life is just the case as in death. That is generally speaking this is the ulama, many of the ulama of the opinion that this is in terms of hurma, in terms of sanctity of the dead person. The sanctity of a dead person in life is the same as in death, but that does not necessarily equate to the fact that a dead person is going to feel the fact that they're in a fridge, and that's for a few reasons. Number one, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us what's going to happen to that dead person. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Inna alladhina qalu rabbuna Allahu thumma istaqamu tatanazzalu alayhim wal malaikatu an la takhafu wa la tahzanu wa abshiru bil jannati allati kuntum tu'adun nahnu awliya'ukum fil hayati dunya fil akhirah." That the angels will come, descend, take the dead body up, and obviously there's other hadith that he'll go above the heavens. They'll say who this person is. That can't happen if he's feeling and he's in the and he is in the morgue. Another thing is Allah said, وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِظَلَّامٍ لِلْعَبِيدِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a oppressor to his slaves. Once you have left the Darul Akhirah as a dead person, you can once you have left this dunya and you're in the barzakh, you can no longer come to the dunya. So you can't feel that which is in the dunya. So even what happens to you in the barzakh, the people of the dunya can't see it, can't witness it, and you cannot feel and eat and do what the people of the dunya do. You've changed realm. And that just leads on to afwan, the issue of autopsies. We know that obviously as a Muslim you should not have autopsies. Obviously we're not supposed to do that to the dead, but if that happens to happen, a tashrih, as they call it, for the autopsy to happen, then obviously the dead person inshallah ta'ala will not feel that, because obviously we based on what just passed, but that doesn't mean it's supposed to be done. It's only supposed to be done if there are mitigating circumstances that have caused an autopsy to happen, not for the sake of anything.
So it wouldn't come under, for example, the tahrim of or the thing of them, breaking the bones, and stuff like that in the hadith. Someone's asked a question with regards to the dua of, it was to do with, hold on a second, let me find this question. Does a dying person know that he's dying? I.e., does a dying person know that he's dying? I mean, from what I understand, there's a hadith that show that the person, dying, there's a difficulty, sakratul maut, for example, the difficulties of death you know.
So it's the Prophet said, indeed in death there are pangs, there's agony.
There's agony, there's pain. So there's a you know you're dying when you're taking your last breaths, you know, at that point, you know. So generally speaking, yeah, as well as the hadith about the soul leaving the body of a believer leaves easily the soul of a disbeliever as if it's going through a comb, you know. It's what I'm saying. So there's pains, and there's a knowledge and an awareness of a person dying.
Exactly.
Inshallah. Any other questions, or we're going to close there?
Should we Muslims write a will even if we are young?
With regards to writing a will, then if you have wealth, first of all, you should write a will. The Messenger of Allah said a person who has something to leave behind, wealth, shouldn't let a day pass except that he writes a will, and that might need updating, you know, when things happen. So wills need to be updated if something changes, for example, in your circumstances. You know, so if you're wealthy, definitely, even if you're young, someone might be young and inherited loads of money. Okay, they might be young, 20, 23, 24, but they also know what they want to do. They want to give a third away. They want to do something.
Well, now this is a very important question, because you said that the brother asked will, and in the Arabic language or in the English language, a will is what you leave behind. In the Arabic language, we have a wasiyah, and then we have the tarika. So the wasiyah is what is a third that you can give prior to the distribution of your wealth that will go to members of your family, whether or not you agree with it or not. So in Islam, in terms of your will, you can't give all your money to a dog or something like that. Your money is going to be split in accordance to Islamic inheritance, shi'ta am abayt, whether you like it or not. Then you've got the wasiyah. And obviously Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas went to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, said something of the lines of usi bi mali kullihi, so should I give all of my wealth? The Prophet said no. And then he said bishatri, half of it. The Prophet said no. And after he said bithuluthi, and the Prophet said what? Athuluthu wa thuluthu kathir. The third, and the third is a lot. So wasiyah is a third of your wealth is what you give to prior to your death. But there will be an amount that will go to your relatives, father, mother, brother, sister, possibly, and son and daughter, or sons and daughters, uncles, grandparents if they're alive, and your parents are dead, or things. We know. There's a certain amount that will go to certain people, which is which is part of your inheritance, which is after you die. So could you quickly, Shaykh AbdulWahid, just say the difference? Some people say will. I used to understand a will to be qismatu tarika ba'd al-maut, giving away wealth, giving away your wealth after you die. The wasiyah,
basically, when you I think Jazakallah for highlighting the point. Your wasiyah is you saying stuff like, okay, bury me quickly, don't take my body to another country. Bury me in a Muslim graveyard, don't bury me amongst non-Muslims, for example. Ensuring that you have a burial, don't wail over me. Don't do stuff which is impermissible according to the Sharia. That's your wasiyah. Even to your son, saying to your sons, for Allah, maintain your salawat. Be kind to people that are below you, as well. Leaving a wasiyah advice. Also as well, if you've got wealth, you say in there that you want to give a third of it, up to a third of it, and you say, for example, you want to leave some to the masjid and to this person or that person, you can give away up to a third. Right, that's your wasiyah. As for your your money, your wealth, when you die, there's it goes to your inheritors as stipulated in the Quran. You have no say over that. You can't, and something which is common here in the UK because of the system here is that your next of kin. It goes to your next of kin. Your next of kin would be your spouse, for example, in the case of being married. The problem there is that's not what Islam says. So now, as a Muslim that has wealth, you have to make sure that you stipulate in your wasiyah that also your inheritance has to be distributed in accordance to the Islamic law, and this is a person that you're appointed to do, and so on and so forth. So that's really key as well with regards to as it connects to funerals and dying. And like you mentioned before, there are certain things that come out before the inheritors get any money. Debts that have to be paid. That has to come out before. Your funeral expenses comes out before even the debts that are paid. The debts that are owed to people, or the debts that are owed, for example, to Allah, if you haven't performed Hajj, for example, that comes out. And there's a list of things, inshallah, that obviously is studied in the courses on inheritance and stuff like that. So I think that's it. I know you've got another talk coming up, inshallah. So barakallahu feekum, jazakallah khairan for joining us in this discussion. And inshallah, perhaps we can do it again sometime soon. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.